Okay. Ms. Clark, over to you for our next submitter.
Next speaker is submitter 2922, Kevin Whittock, on page 221.
Thank you. Hello, Mr. Whittock. We can see you if you take yourself off mute. I'm afraid you're on mute at the moment.
How's that now?
That is very, very much improved. And I see you've been sitting in the waiting room for a while. Thank you very, very much for your patience.
No problem.
Thank you.
Just pleased to be able to participate.
Well, we're pleased to have you here. We've received your submission. We have all read it, and you've got the next 10 minutes to tell us what you want and why you want it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Lovely.
I'd like to start off by saying that I am absolutely opposed to the proposed amendments. Firstly, the reduction in the number of dog parks and off-leash areas, although we don't utilize them because we have 2 acres for our dogs to run around on. I believe there are hundreds of dog owners who will utilize them. And seeing as how I believe that the council and all councillors have a legal and a moral duty to ensure that the welfare of all animals are taken care of, those dog parks and off-leash areas are important for dogs. It's a known fact that dogs do need the opportunity to run free and experience new sights, smells, scents, etc., as well as the opportunity to associate and socialize with other dogs if they so wish. At the same time, giving the owners of those dogs a chance to meet one another and also socialize, something that I think is utterly important, especially in today's times. Coming to the matter of the dog limitation, the number of dogs, and the possible permitting, there again too, I cannot agree with that. My wife and I lived suburban for 5.5 years, waiting for a rural area, rural section that we could afford, and also where there would be no or very few obstructions to us keeping a number of dogs in order to breed with our breed that we love, and living in the suburban area where you've got neighbors within 10 meters on either side of you, I just felt that was impossible. We found this property where we are 11.5 years ago, and promptly bought our first white shepherd with a plan of breeding when she was old enough, and we went on to do that. But realizing that there's a very small gene pool for our specific breed in New Zealand, we decided to import. Over a number of years, we imported 3 dogs at considerable cost. And also later on, we imported frozen semen from Italy and South Africa, once again at considerable cost. Now, these proposed laws, change to the laws, could very well stymie us insofar as our breeding is concerned. I believe we need to have more than 2 dogs to carry out successful breeding. Although we're not professional breeders, we don't breed litter after litter. We might breed 1, at most 2 litters a year. But we do need the dogs to fall back on. Now, some of our dogs have been with us in excess of 10 years. So although they're no longer breeding, they are pets, they're part of the family. We would hate to have to get rid of them because of a reduction in the number of dogs we're allowed to have. As far as I'm aware, this whole thing comes about, or has come about, as a result of relatively few complaints regarding dogs. and mainly revolving around 7 properties. Now, why should 90% of the good dog owners, compliant dog owners, be victimized and punished because of a handful? Farmers are exempt, but yet I don't think council has been able to provide us with any proof that farmers are any better at caring for their dogs than what are rural people, non-farming people. I also feel for people who run rescue operations. The number of dogs that they will have on their property can double in the space of a few hours. So, you know, applying for a permit, if they apply for a permit for 6 dogs and it's approved, tomorrow they might have 8 or 10. And what happens to those additional dogs? Do we confine them to the death chamber? Where is the welfare and caring then for our animals? As far as the input from neighbours is concerned for the permit story, I don't know if council have ever given any thought to the fact that neighbours might be at odds with one another, not necessarily over dog-related matters, but something totally non-dog related. And yeah, you can have somebody seen an opportunity to take revenge and say, no, I don't want my neighbour to have dogs and have more than 2 dogs. It'll be a damned nuisance. Is that fair? I don't believe so. I also believe it's kind of autocratic instead of democratic to force this type of thing on us as dog owners. Numbers, I think, have shown that 90% plus of rural dog owners are good dog owners. They care for their animals. They comply with the dog bylaws. They register their dogs. I know there are a lot of unregistered dogs, but my belief is that a lot of them will be suburban folks. You know, I travel around the Huntley area quite often, living here, and I often see dogs roaming the streets, unaccompanied, but that's town people, it's not rural people. Driving around the rural areas, I don't think I've ever seen a dog roaming the roads without an owner or without somebody being handy. So yeah, that is why I oppose these proposed amendments. I see them as unfair, undemocratic, and certainly not taking into account the welfare of our animals. There are, I believe, in the existing laws, there's scope for dealing with non-compliant dog owners. And I do believe that more interest and more care should be taken to see that the authorities that are there to deal with dog-related matters are actually capable and able of doing that.
Thank you. There is a question for you if you're happy to take it. And I just want to make a comment that it is, I agree, it's a sad indictment that we are increasingly needing animal rescue places. Mayor Allen, you had a question.
Yeah, look, thanks for your submission, Kevin. It is appreciated. I'm just trying to figure out whether you're the Kevin that lives up the road from me.
Yep, that's the same one, Alan.
Nice to meet you, Kevin. He's my neighbour. I haven't met him before.
That's right, and I believe you have the same breed of dog as what we have.
My son does, yes.
Oh, yep.
He does. So, but look, and I admit, as an owner, Kevin, you are superb. So no way, we don't take this as a slight against you.
No, well, that's good to know. Thank you, Alan. But,
well, at least we don't have.
I know. We'll get away from the personal stuff, Kevin.
Yep.
We don't have neighbours at war here. That's good. Did you have a question, Mayor Allen, or was that just by way of a comment?
No, it was just a comment that when I saw the name, I thought, oh, God, I think I know who that is. When he started speaking, knowing he was from South Africa originally, I thought, yeah, I know who that is now.
So there are no more questions for you, but thank you. That was a really interesting submission, and thank you very much for taking the time and sticking with it to get through to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And in closing, can I just please ask that the council go back and have a good rethink on this, and if there are any laws that need changing to make animal control or the SPCA's jobs any easier, then let's look at doing that rather than burdening good compliant dog owners.
Yeah, your point is very well made. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Clark, do we have a waiting room?
I'm just waiting. I don't think we have anyone in the waiting room at the moment. We've tried contacting the last 3 submitters, but we haven't got a response.
How long ago did you contact them? I'm sorry, I don't mean that in a pejorative way.
Well, your next one's not due until 20 past, so it's still 4 minutes away. Not everybody arrives before time.
They would normally arrive 15 minutes before.
Yeah, I realise that too.
So I think we'll just take an informal. So none of the 3 have responded. Okay.
No.
So let's
hang on. Apparently trying to get in now. Catherine Hay.
There you go. I told you, just in time.
I think she's finding them in her hat and pulling them out at the last minute. Very nicely done.
Right, yes. Yep, so next speaker is 3298, Catherine Hay on page 13.
I'll unmute. Is that what you want me to do?
Oh, yeah, look, we can see you. We can hear you, Ms. Hay. Thank you very much, and thank you for being early as well. That's been really, really helpful. We've got your submission, and we've also got the attachment to it. We have read that. You've got the next 10 minutes. It's all yours.
Thank you. I'll just introduce myself. I'm a former lawyer. I worked for Wilkinson Adams. They had the Crown Warrant in Dunedin, and in that role I undertook all of the prosecutions on behalf of the Otago SPCA. So I've got some familiarity with using the legislation for welfare purposes. I've lived in the Waikato in Te Kōwhai for a bit over a decade. I've owned dogs my entire life. We've always had at least one dog, and I am currently, one of my current jobs is working as a dog trainer. I work for Joanne Small at Cool Canines, delivering one of her classes. These submissions are my own. And I have not consulted with Jo on these submissions. They're my personal opinion.
Thank you.
So coming from those 2 backgrounds, the council has responsibilities to the ratepayers and people in the Waikato. Those responsibilities are general, well-being and the health and thriving communities. Climate change responsibilities, looking after the vulnerable amongst our communities, and instituting fair and fact-based policies with that in mind, as well as fiscal responsibilities to ratepayers. The council also has particular responsibilities for the bylaws and legislation that it manages. For dog control, that comes under a number of headings. That's welfare, wandering, roaming dogs, nuisance and barking, biting and safety, basically, are the headings that I see there. The people within the community are young, old, working, unemployed, farming, lifestylers, families, retired people. Some of those people own dogs and some of them don't, and all of them affected by the policies and how you choose to enforce them and how you choose to frame them. There's some facts about dogs that can't be changed because those are the animal that we're dealing with. One of those facts is that they need off-leash exercise. They need it for their physical, their social, their emotional and cognitive needs. My submission is that if we fail to meet those, then we fail not only dogs, and dog owners, but we also fail the other people who live in the communities around dog owners, because it means that dogs having their needs unmet impact everybody's ability to enjoy their life here in the Waikato. Now, the main branches of the proposed changes are the, sorry, I've gone blank.
You have read it all, so
okay, yeah. No, I meant my screen. The permit and the changes to the number and locations of the off-leash exercise areas. And my argument is that both of these branches are worse for the community. Both of these changes are worse for the community in terms of dog owners and non-dog owners. So just to briefly touch on the permit, I think a lot of the submitters have already talked about the permit, but and have talked about the problems arising with welfare. I would like to put forward a solution. So at the moment in the current bylaw, clause 5.3 deals with nuisance, and clause 5.3 gives animal control officers a number of tools. Those tools are limiting the number of dogs and requiring the dog owners to do things that are necessary to reduce nuisance. A permit doesn't have any of those tools associated with it. If you took 5.3, made it, copied and pasted it, made it 14.1, changed nuisance to welfare, then you would give animal control officers the tools that they need to be able to deal with welfare issues arising within households with 1 or 2 dogs or more than 2 dogs, and to deal with welfare issues arising in urban issues or in rural circumstances. And you would be providing a framework with which animal control officers are already familiar with using. So that would enable, where the number of dogs is causing a welfare issue, in that framework there is already the opportunity for them to require the number of dogs to be limited without impacting on good dog owners. So the other point is, just briefly, it takes resources away from dealing with problems by fixing a problem that doesn't need to be fixed. So if you put a whole lot of resources into a permit program, which is permitting a whole lot of people who are not causing a problem, you're taking those resources away from dealing with things that are problems. And council's not running a surplus. I'm sure you're fiscally responsible, so you don't have a whole lot of money sitting away in bank accounts. And this proposal has not been costed. So in terms of fiscal responsibility, my submission is it's not particularly wise. So just coming now into off-lead. Now, the reduction in the off-lead areas are likely to increase nuisance behaviour, barking in particular, and it's likely to make the dogs that people encounter in life less likely to be well socialised, less likely to be well exercised. It's more difficult to do so. So when you encounter a dog that's got those circumstances, it means that everybody is more likely to encounter dogs that are less dangerous, that are more dangerous, sorry, and less safe. Secondly, making those off-lead areas more difficult to access in areas particularly such as Te Kōwhai and Horotū, sorry, Te Kōwhai and Wharawhara, those the closest place that we have will then be Horotū. It's a 23-kilometre round trip from Wharawhara to Horotū if you institute these, and that has to be a single trip because it's hot. We can't leave the dog in a car and take the dog on another errand and call in on the way back from the supermarket. So that is 1/3 of the households having to make special driving trips of considerable length. Now, people are working, people have kids, people are farming, people have stock. It's important to get your dog off your property. To have to do that on a regular basis is enormously onerous to people to have good dog care and to make their dogs safe and well socialised. We need off-lead areas in every cluster of housing. On lead is not a sufficient replacement. It's not meeting the dog's needs to be able to sniff, to be able to get around. And it's also really difficult for people who might be more vulnerable, people who might be walking with a disability. It's hard to manage a dog on lead. You can have a dog under control off lead much easier in a safe environment. I don't know how many of the people on council have had family dogs and toddlers, but you need your hands when you've got small children, right? And it's really hard. I've walked with toddlers, one in a pram, one holding my hand, and a dog on the lead for a short distance to get to the dog park, and then be able to let them off. Managing everyone in and out of cars and managing the whole walk on lead is really hard. And the family dog is the lifestyle dream. That's what thriving communities want to have, a lot of them. And it's nudging it to make it harder. And I say we should nudge it to make it easier. Make it easier to do the right thing. So just a wee mention about Te Kowhai Park, because I'm a Te Kowhai local, and Te Kowhai Park is an off-lead area has been taken away from us. Now, that means that people in Te Kowhai have to drive to Horatu to get off-leash exercise. We have a lot of new sections, around 300 new houses going in around us. And I'll tell you, walking around there, I'd say the ratio is higher than 30%. I'd say it's more like 50% have dogs. That's a huge increase in the need of resources, but we're getting our resources lowered in terms of access to off-leash areas. People living in lifestyle blocks, working in town, they've got a longer drive. It's much, much more difficult to be able to carve out the time to drive. Thirdly, we've got more people closer together because those blocks were formerly rural and now they're more of a lifestyle. We need off-lead areas. Finally, the Te Kowhai Park has a wandering dog problem. And so we don't know whose dog's poos are fouling that area. And secondly, I can tell you for a fact that poos fouling that area are foul poos.
So Ms. Hay, I need to stop you there because your time is up. And I'm sorry, there is no time for questions. You've made some excellent points, and thank you for your points also being constructive. And I'd like to thank you for your work for the SPCA, because I know from a legal perspective that's very often pro bono. So thank you for that, and thank you for taking the time to submit.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Clark, over to you.
Yes, next submitter is 3091 Paula Sullivan on page 178.
Thank you. Matt, I feel like I should be calling you Houston. Do we have a problem there in the audio connection? Oh, no, I see.
Oh, no, I think she's coming on now.
See how you've cured it without even touching it.
Hello.
Hello, Ms. Sullivan. We can hear you. We don't have a video screen for you or camera on for you. Was that something you intended to do, or are you?
I intended to do, but it's not letting me get into my. I'm doing this on my phone because my computer is not letting me use the Zoom.
They can be pesky. Look, if you're happy to do it, we can hear you perfectly well. So unless you just need to turn your camera on, but you may prefer, since it's on your phone, just to do it.
Yeah, no, I can turn the camera on. Hopefully. Are you there?
We are still here, but you are still only on audio.
Yes, I'm just looking for my camera. Is that better?
No, I'm afraid you're still.
No, that's not good. Okay, that's fine. So we'll just do it on audio then.
So we have, thank you. We have received your submission, and thank you for taking the time to come and submit to us. And we have read it. So please, just in the next 10 minutes, give us your highlights.
Well, I mean, it's a very brief submission, really, and I think that most of your other submitters have probably said everything that I would say anyway, but I guess that my concern is that it appears that the proposal is based on the number of call-outs or events that the council has experienced over a 5-year period. But I found that that was a very unhelpful reason to give in order to make a submission, simply because I thought that if that's the reason, there was no comparison given. For example, for the previous 5 years, what was the number of dog call-outs over the prior 5 years? Was that an increase? In fact, was it a decrease? How was it based in terms of population? Has the population increased over that time? I should say I'm not a dog owner. I am a ratepayer, but I do know several people who live in this district who have several dogs, and they're all good dog owners. I don't think that the proposal as it stands seems to be quite punitive of good dog owners. Responsible dog owners are the kinds of people who take their dogs to dog parks, for example. Reducing the number of dog parks is the opposite of what I would suggest that council should be doing, particularly these days if you're wanting to encourage good dog ownership. The reality is that there are always going to be negligent dog owners. That's a given. Just like there are always going to be people who cause other crimes, who don't want to pay their taxes, a number of rule breakers of any type are always going to be with us. I think I saw that someone said that it was using a sledgehammer to crack a pin. Well, I thought that was quite clever. But in fact, I don't think there's a pin to even want to crack. I think that you have the tools available to you under the Animal Welfare Act and under the Dog Control Act to deal with negligent dog owners. And the thing that strikes me also is that, and what the proposal didn't, or the proposal I saw, didn't contain any kind of research. And to be honest, that's what I would have expected. It would be some kind of grounded research about the reasons for these changes. And there's an awful lot of research around, dog ownership, dog abuse, dog neglect. I don't need to tell you that, and I'm sure other submitters may have mentioned it. But if there is a problem with negligent dog owners, then, as I say, you've got the tools to deal with them. You don't need what appears to be a very disproportionate proposal to deal with that. It's disproportionate because it's arbitrary. There is no research that's been attached to the proposal that I can see that looks at, is it the number of dogs that causes someone to be a negligent owner? Now, on the face of it, I would suggest it's not. I think if you're going to have a negligent dog owner, then that person is going to be negligent regardless of the number of dogs they have. Just like if you have a negligent parent, that parent is going to be negligent regardless of the number of children they have. And there's an awful lot of research these days. In fact, speaking of parents, there's an awful lot of research these days, which is grounded research and is readily accessible, about the link between child abuse, domestic violence, and animal abuse. And I'm quite sure that the SPCA would have access to that kind of information if you're not. But that's certainly the case. And so, this is not really relevant, but I would suggest, well, if there's a high proportion of negligent dog owners, then what is that about? What are they? What's going on with these people? Are they just purely negligent for the sake of it because they don't care? Are there other things that need to be put in place? Is it a matter of education? There's nothing in the proposal that says we've attempted to educate people, but this has failed. On X amount of times, these people haven't met these criteria. These days, animal ownership, pet ownership, is becoming more of a thing than less of a thing. And I think that the suggestion that the council should be able to monitor the number of dogs that people have in rural areas it doesn't have the weight that it has in cities. And there's no in the policy, there's no adequate reason that I can see why farmers should be exempt from the same controls. Because if you're going to exempt farmers, well, what is a farmer? When you look at that, who's the definition of farmer? I live on a block in your area. I have animals, I have cows, I have horse, alpacas, a whole variety of things. And I don't own dogs, but I could do. But I would be exempt, presumably, based on your proposal. Well, what's that about? Why should I be exempt? Why should any other farmer be exempt? I think that it appears to me, and I could well be wrong, that this is based on social problems rather than specific dog control problems. As I say, you have the mechanism to deal with difficult dog owners or negligent owners. You've got the mechanism to deal with dog attacks. It's simply a matter of, do you have the staff to deal with it? I don't know. Are the staff trained to deal with it properly? I don't know. But there's also nothing in the proposal that actually says how would reducing the number of dog parks and how would reducing the numbers of dogs that a person could own, how would that in itself deal with the issue of dog attacks and negligence in dog owners? There's nothing in there that I can see. And again, it seems arbitrary. It seems as though, to be honest, the feeling I got was that this is something being driven by one person, possibly. Is it somebody's hobby horse? I don't know. There just doesn't seem to have been much, with all due respect, much professional expertise put into this proposal to enable people to adequately respond to what appears to be the problem. I mean, I struggle with, you know, finding any sort of link between the number of dog abuse cases and or incidents over 5 years. I struggle to connect that with a need to reduce the number of dog owners can have, or to reduce the number of dog parks. There's no causal link that I can see between those two. And that's why, you know, that's why my submissions were extremely brief, because I really couldn't figure out what the proposal was getting at, what the proposal was based off in terms of an evidential basis, and where was the causal link between these numbers over 5 years and the need to take these kind of actions. And of course, these actions, you know, I've seen other submitters make their comments about, you know, well, if I'm breeding dogs, you know, do I have to just reduce the number of dogs I'm allowed to breed now, even though I'm a registered breeder? If I rescue dogs, you know, do I now have to stop doing that? There's no, what the council should be looking to do in my submission really is to support good dog ownership.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. Your 10 minutes is up.
Thank you.
Thank you. And look, you've made a number of good points that's really helpful. And I also commend you on recognising that this is a proposal. We are looking for feedback, and we have received good feedback via the submission process. So thank you very much, and thank you for persevering with your technology as well.
No, that's all right. Can I ask a question though? One question. I just want about the process. Because I didn't read or didn't see anything after the submissions. Are you looking? You know, are you going to consider the submissions in terms of the proposal as it stands, or will there be some more feedback into the proposals?
No, there won't be any more. There won't be external feedback other than where we've asked for it. The next step in this process is for a deliberations report to be put together, and then for the councillors to deliberate on that, which will include all the points that have been raised by submitters. So that, again, is probably a lengthy process. So that's the way that it works.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Bye.
Bye-bye. Ms. Clark, do we have Mr. Kessel, or is he a no-show?
He got his time wrong, so he won't be doing his submission today, but we have offered him a time for tomorrow.
Okay, and he's comfortable with that?
He hasn't confirmed yet, but we have offered it to him.
Okay, all right. So that is the end of our submitters for today?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so with that, I'll adjourn the meeting, and please be ready to begin with our first submitter, who is